Do What You Can Where You Are with What You Have by Teddy Roosevelt. I strongly believe that my grandmother is a great embodiment of this quote because she grew up with nothing but she has lived an incredible life. Every one of her difficulties that she has gone through in her life has formed a callus that strengthens with time and shows her hard work. In this speech, I want to talk about where my grandmother came from and the war that was happening around her time that was giving her a lot of difficulties and how she overcame them. Let's begin with where my grandmother came from and her background. She was born in Hue, Vietnam in 1941. Hue is a city in central Vietnam and at that time was under the rule of Nguyen dynasty. She was born into a poor family with 9 other children and she was the second to oldest child. At the age of 10, she was forced to drop out of school to care for her younger siblings. At the age of 15, she was married off through an arranged marriage. She then went on to have 8 of her own children at a very young age. There was a big war that was happening in Vietnam at that time that affected many people's lives, including my grandmother's. The war that was happening was the Vietnam War that started in 1954 between North Vietnam and South Vietnam. Because of this war, my grandfather had to leave my grandmother and go out to war to fight. Due to the fact that Hue is in between North Vietnam and South Vietnam, the city suffered a lot of damages to the buildings and homes. The war caused a lot of severe civil disturbances, and there was an increase in crimes that left only a small amount of safe shelters that people can go to. Because of the war that was happening in Vietnam, my grandmother went through a lot of difficult times. The difficulties that my grandmother went through is something that even I would not imagine having enough strength to do, and that is why I think she is such an amazing person. Because my grandfather was out to war, my grandmother was raising her children all by herself with the little resources that she had. My grandmother had very little money, so she got a lot of her food from nature, and sometimes her relatives would share food with her because they felt bad for the children. She said that there were times when she would want to give up or that she wouldn't even care that she would starve to death. But she thought about her family and decided that this isn't just about her, so she decided to go on. Though she decided to keep going, it was still hard to see many people that she was close with die. These struggles did not stop my grandmother from striving to get a better life for her family. After my grandfather had come back from the war, they immigrated to the U.S. as refugees. The beginning of this new life was a rough start because of the culture shock and the adapting. My grandmother and grandfather were taking odd jobs because of the language barriers. Adaptation came with time, and in the end, my grandmother had the life that she has deserved. Even though my grandmother went through a tough life, she always tells me that she has no regrets. My grandmother, who was born in Hue, Vietnam, lived through a war that gave her one difficulty after another, but she somehow triumphed and lived on into a better life. She was and is truly an amazing person, and I am so glad to have a deeper look into her life. My grandmother followed Teddy Roosevelt's advice. She did what she could wherever she was with whatever she had.